When you're fed up with fighting food and your body, join us here. I'm Allie Shapiro, creator of the Truce with Food program and your host for Insatiable, where we explore the hidden aspects of fighting our food, our weight, and our bodies, and dive deep into nutrition science and true whole health. Fair warning, this is not your parents' health care. This is a big rebel yell to those who crave meaning, hunger for truth, and whose lust for life is truly insatiable. Believe me, freedom awaits. Welcome, everybody, to Season 3, Episode 7 of the Insatiable podcast, transitioning into a wellness career. So this episode got created and developed because I get questions every week asking me, what about this coaching program? How did you get started being an entrepreneur? From many people who want to transition into the wellness world. And I think it's so great that so many people want to dive into this field because it's so rewarding, so enriching, and we need more healers. If you can't tell, the world's a little crazy right now. Or maybe it's always been and we just won't tolerate it anymore. But with our podcast episode seasonal focus on renewal, I thought what could be more renewing than a career shift, or at least bringing more wellness into your life, either on the side or as a full-time gig. So how did I get started is the most common question I get. And how I got started is not going to be as useful to you as the two questions that I share with you today in today's episode. And these questions could be really applied to anyone who's thinking about a career shift or change, but particularly in the wellness industry, I can give you some context for these questions. The truth is, there are as many paths as there are people and fascinations and curiosities that we all have. So I invited on 4 people with wildly different backgrounds and at different stages of where their healing gifts are being used to chime in with their backgrounds, how they got started, how they're approaching this whole thing especially from a self-employment lens. And then I chimed in and gave my 2 cents as well. So on today's episode, you're going to hear from Tashmika Torak, who is the founder of the Firecracker Foundation, a nonprofit which works to holistically heal childhood sexual trauma survivors. Jennifer Nathanson, who is a nurse practitioner who comes from a traditional medical background but is transitioning into a functional medicine and traversing the emotional terrain with clients as they change their food and lifestyle. Autumn Beam, who was a stay-at-home mom and is now going back and getting her master's degree and in the home stretch of becoming a clinical nutritionist. And then Eva Shawforth, who's a yoga teacher and is working in the corporate world and has a growing interest in nutrition and supporting people to change their lifestyle. So you're going to hear a lot of questions, discussion. We set it up almost as a panel. So enjoy it. One key thing that I want to emphasize after the episode was done, I often get from people that they think the gold standard, especially if they're interested in the behavior change side of things, is to go back and get a master's degree like I did. And I emphasize in the episode that, of course, I support education. And anyone who knows me knows I'm the school junkie. I might go back to get my PhD eventually. I don't know. I really prize the continuing pursuit of knowledge. But what I really wanted to emphasize in this episode, especially if you want to work for yourself, is that getting a master's degree isn't necessarily necessary, especially if you already have one. I know a lot of my clients tend to be very conscientious and want to do the best as possible. And they may already have a master's degree or 2 and think that they have to go completely back and repivot. And of course, having advanced training is always helpful. However, I see some severe lacking, even in academia, about how we're approaching behavioral change and in the coaching field. So that was my point that I wanted to just re-emphasize here. Always go back if it's calling to you. However, it can be expensive. And what I found is it's not always some of the programs out there are completely biased in terms of they're pushing a certain type of diet or they're pushing a certain type of behavioral change like positive psychology or cognitive behavioral therapy. And both of which I've basically found will get you started, but they're not going to get you finished, which is why I will eventually be licensing Truce with Food. But in terms of thinking about your own educational path. Just wanted to emphasize that. And then if you are interested in transitioning to a wellness career, I definitely recommend taking my quiz, What Does Your Comfort Eating Style, on my website, alishapiro.com. Another way to say this quiz would be, what do your eating habits say about you? And you can get some windows into why Truce with Food is so effective, and the approach that I take. So you can start to think about behavior change from a different perspective than we're often used to hearing about it in terms of habits and thoughts, etc. So enjoy today's episode. And if you guys like this and want me to do more about this, send me an email, allie@allieshapiro.com. There's as many topics on this that we can do. And if the community is interested in it, I could do more episodes on specific educational paths, etc. if this is interesting to you beyond the questions that I get. So enjoy today's episode. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 7, Transitioning into a Wellness Career. I am so excited about today's episode. We have Tashmika Torek from the Firecracker Foundation, Autumn Beam, who's transitioning into functional medicine, Jennifer Nathanson, who is a traditionally trained nurse practitioner who's transitioning into the wellness world, and Ava Shawforth, I hope I pronounced your last name right, Ava, who is a yoga teacher and is in the corporate world right now and is finding ways to integrate wellness and probably will eventually transition. So we're doing this episode out of the generosity of their time, but also through the years, I have gotten so many questions about transitioning into a wellness career. And there isn't a one-size-fits-all for everybody. So I brought all of these great people on today to talk about their own transitions, the questions they have, mainly the educational paths and decisions they've made. And then we're also going to get into more the financial aspect / I guess it would be product fit of how do you create something that people will provide value and whatnot, which is the education piece is part of that. So thanks for joining us, everybody, today before we get started. Before we get into the educational component, I want you guys as listeners to start to think about these two questions as you hear everybody else talk. Because one of the big questions that I get is, well, the gold standard is to go back to school and get a master's degree like you. And I tell everyone that's actually not true. So as much as I love education and it's important to me, what I've also found out is our educational structures are structured by patriarchy. They have a lot of blind spots in how we approach healing. And so I really want you guys to realize that a master, it's never going to hurt you to get more education. And it teaches you to think, et cetera, et cetera. But I really feel like the degrees we have today are not built for the wellness and the healing we need for tomorrow. And I would love to hear everyone else's perspective and paths, but don't think that necessarily because something has, I know like Cornell has a nutrition program that someone asked me to look at the other day. And Cornell is a great school, and yet their nutrition program was looking at things like fat in terms of heart disease and stuff. And, it's not a functional approach, which we'll get into that I think is really important. But don't think that because something's traditional or has a lot of prestige necessarily means it's going to be effective for tomorrow. So I want you to think of these two questions that have really guided me really well as we start to ask everybody else their educational path. First of all, I want you to think, what questions do you have that you aren't satisfied with the answers? So what keeps you up wondering and curious? Because that's going to be the path that you really want to follow. For me, I was really fascinated that why didn't people know that they could reverse a lot of things with food? And then I was also fascinated about a year into my own practice that we stopped talking about food after the 4th session. And that was really fascinating to me. And that guided my educational path. The other thing I want you to think about is, what do you want to spend your days doing? Okay, because this is going to really influence what educational path you have. So what I mean by that is I had always said in my early days that like if I could have done this under an academic structure, I would have, but I wanted to pursue the ideas that I felt weren't being looked at. So if you want to spend your days coaching and everything, you may want to work in a traditional system because you'll spend most of your time coaching versus I spend half my time coaching, half my time building a business. I'll be interested to hear what Tashmika says about running a foundation. If she spends most of her time being a practitioner, probably not. A lot of people who sell multi-level marketing things like supplements or juice Plus or Beachbody, they're going to spend most of their days networking and trying to find more people to come into that. So think about what you actually want to be doing in the short term and the long term. It's always great to be mentored, and we'll get into that. But think of those two questions as you listen to everybody else answer. So Tashmika, I kind of said to talk to you. So give us a little bit of intro and background, and then I'd love to hear the educational choices that you made.
Sure. So I founded a nonprofit called the Firecracker Foundation, and it provides free holistic healing services for children and families who experience sexual violence. It's about 5 years old. We celebrate our 5th year in July, so I'm really excited about that. And it's what I like to call, what it is, it's a survivor-led, survivor-driven, and trauma-informed and trauma-aware. And so we really try to root our practice in what survivors need and what they're asking for. So my educational choices, I actually tell people all the time that I dabbled in college.
True curious person.
I definitely went to college sometimes, but I never really found what was going to be my thing. And I met my husband, and we had our 3 boys, and I was, and then I actually went back again, and still it just didn't stick. And so I started this organization, like I said, 5 years ago, but I actually don't have a degree in anything really. And so that was my education plan. So what actually guided the creation of the organization is the fact that I am a survivor myself. I worked in nonprofit for about 10. At this point, I've worked in nonprofit for about 10 years. Almost, it's maybe closer to 15. I don't know. I'm not good with math. It feels like a real long time. And so my combination of being really curious about what it would look like to give child survivors the information that they need earlier and the family's support earlier in terms of kind of an intervention rather than all of the preventative work that we spend billions of dollars on in this country to treat addictions and to treat or to prevent or intervene with domestic violence and all of these other things. I thought maybe if we started a little bit earlier, we could avoid some of those problems. And so that's kind of how I took my nonprofit experience and built this organization to serve survivors.
I love that because people think that they're starting from scratch, right? If they have to transition to a new career, and it's like, no, the skills that you've learned elsewhere. And I think your point brings up what I was trying to say about traditional education. Again, I love it. However, oftentimes trusting someone's real experience really gives you insights when you've been through it yourself that often the theoretical stuff or the norms around this have been overlooked. So I love that you share that.
Well, and I joke all the time that someone better give me a damn PhD because I fucking am reading I read about trauma every day of my life. Like if you want to know about trauma and how it impacts the body and the brain and ancestral trauma, like I'm reading about all of this stuff that, how epigenetics and like I'm constantly learning and honing my, knowledge of this topic. Plus I've experienced it. And then on top of that, having my nonprofit experience that was really just boots on the ground kind of development work, like learning how to raise money and learning how to build connections and build programs and all of these things. It's all part of kind of what my life has been, about, and community organizing and grassroots and all of this stuff has like been my life. And so, I have a complex relationship to university. I have 3 children who eventually are going to make that decision, and I'm constantly navigating what I'm going to tell, because student debt now is kind of bananas, and it's how are you going to work your way through college so you can afford to actually not be poor after you go through college?
There's a lot of questions.
It's complex. It's not simple. It's not a simple answer.
Well, and what I love is I think for all of us in wellness is that we're all creating something that really doesn't exist, right? There's a lot of gaps in the healthcare system right now. So there's not going to be a right or wrong path. And I want everyone to get that based on what they're interested in. So thanks. That's great. Jennifer, how about you? Because you're coming from traditional medicine. You obviously have, educational experience in that. And yet now you're bridging from that. So can you talk a little bit about where you are and how you're bridging?
So I currently am just finishing a program for learning about functional nutrition, and I'm just starting to work with clients in that realm. And this is where I want to start. I'm not sure exactly yet where I want to go, but this is where I want to be right now. And I did start out in conventional medicine. I'm a nurse practitioner and made that choice after I decided or figured out I couldn't do physics in college to do pre-med. And I also worked alongside in a pediatrician's office, both the physician and a nurse practitioner. And I really enjoyed her lifestyle a lot better than what I was seeing his lifestyle was. And it seemed a lot more reasonable to me. So I went that path and practiced for 10 years, over 10 years in surgical field, specialty field, and loved my job. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people that I was working with. I enjoyed the patients. I enjoyed collaborating with the other providers. There was a lot of collaboration and talking to and just managing the different aspects of patient care. And then a couple years ago, 3 years ago now, I got really sick with pneumonia. And after finally getting over being sick with pneumonia, I ended up having to take antibiotics for 8 weeks. And it just kind of wrecked my system. And I can't remember how I got turned on to things, but I initially got turned on to like paleo and Chris Kresser and started doing my own investigative work and did a lot of gut healing because I was having digestive issues and I was also having a lot of skin issues, which was really telling. And so once I got turned on to that realm of medicine, it really resonated with me. I really liked the aspect of figuring out the root cause and not putting a Band-Aid on things. And so I started kind of questioning what I was doing in my role that I had loved for 10 years. Then at the same time, my son was struggling in school. And so I was getting a lot of calls at work that I needed to come pick him up or what to do. And it just got to be too conflicting to be in this job that my heart wasn't totally in anymore, knowing that my kids were needing me more at home and I wanted to kind of transition. So I stopped working and then started studying functional nutrition, which I got turned on to by a functional medicine doctor I worked with for a while.
I love that story because I've noticed people in the traditional medical model, the ones who are kind of, this willing to kind of bridge to the new place, or it actually happens through their own personal experience, which again, I think this is a big important thing for everyone listening is our personal experience is such a rich opening into, oh my God, what's going on here? So I know you took Andrea Nakayama's course, which is someone who I highly recommend if anyone's interested in the nutritional aspect of things. Andrea is a brilliant teacher and she's masterful at knowing functional nutrition. So I'm curious, how did you decide to take her course versus all the other courses that were out there?
Yeah, I started studying and looking into all the different courses that were available. And when I saw the functional doctor that I was working with, and I told her I wanted to transition into maybe functional medicine ultimately, but I wanted to start with nutrition. We talked about different programs and she turned me on to Andrea's program. And then I started researching Andrea's work and it just really resonated with me what she does and how she looks at patients and clients and how she works with them and how she takes the whole perspective. It's not just about the food, but it's really looking at everything and really sticking with that person through their process, helping them become their own advocate and doing it all with a lot of empathy, but not getting taken away by the story, not getting sucked up into their process, but really being able to sit with their uncomfortability and still continue to be their guide. So there was so much that resonated, especially that she takes into account the piece of emotional, social, psychological, all those pieces that are playing into a person's health and wellness.
I'm glad that you brought that up because for everyone listening, like I'm a big fan of the functional approach, which just basically means root cause resolution. You're going to look at depression, anxiety, anything as a symptom, not a diagnosis, is basically the easiest way to describe this. So functional nutrition is the buzzword, but it's what naturopaths have been doing for decades, I would say, or holistic. but it has to sound more masculine and official for it to catch on, right? So functional nutrition sounds, no, but it's great. We're putting a little bit more Western rigor and everything, right? We need both. It's not either or. But what my big worry about in functional medicine is we've forgotten the person who has the digestive system and the blood sugar health inside of them. And that's why I really like Andrea's work. And what you said is, if you really want to help people, you have to understand the whole context that they bring. Food is a great entry point and it's a powerful teacher, but it's a teacher to teach these other things like empathy, compassion, complexity. So I really think if people are interested in wellness, they have to understand how to look at someone in their totality. So thanks for sharing that. Autumn, we'll go to you because you you had no background in medicine.
Nope.
So tell us. Yeah, a little bit about you. And you're going to the University of Bridgeport, right, in Connecticut?
That's right. To get my degree, they call it human nutrition, but what it really is clinical nutrition with a focus in functional medicine. And that was the key difference between their program and a lot of other masters in nutrition programs. And let me tell you, I completely just hemmed and hawed over the idea of going back to school because, like you said, I didn't have a background in medicine. So I didn't have the prerequisites to even be able, so it was going to take me longer, almost a year longer to finish my master's degree than just jumping into a master's degree program. And it was, do I really want to go that deep into it? And kind of like you were talking about earlier, is that something that you don't need to get a master's degree in order to do this? But to that point, the other thing that you said was, what do you want your practice to look like? And so that was the driving force behind the decision to get my master's degree, because I knew that I could get certifications in functional nutrition and get training in nutrition. But what I couldn't do is order blood work for people and read labs and do all the really in-depth things that I really, really wanted to do. And that all came from my experience. So, I'm not going to go into my whole health history. It's long and drawn out, and it involves a lot of different things from, adrenals and thyroid to stealth pathogens, but it's ridiculous. But, that really was like, okay, what do I want this to look like? My daughter's in the entertainment industry. I homeschool. And I don't want to work for someone. Like, I loved working for myself. But in order for me to have a nutrition certification and do the lab side of it that I really wanted to do, I would probably have to work for somebody, right? Like, I'd have to work for, or with a nurse practitioner or a doctor, and that was going to be in someone's office. And I'm like, I don't have time for that mess. I need to make my own schedule. So that was the big driving force behind going in and deciding on the master's degree. And so once you get a master's degree, then you're eligible with 1,000 hours of supervision from an accredited person or licensed professional to get your certified nutritional specialist license, which enables you to then be able to do those things like order labs and have a professional account with a high grade supplement company and do all those things that I wanted to do. And, for me in my journey, I did all the research on my own for probably 10 years before I started school. And I learned, I can't say everything there was to know about nutrition because I'm still learning a lot, but I knew a lot. And I became that token person that everybody came to me for advice. And I was like, I got to get paid for this, y'all. So I went back to school. But for me, changing my diet, and there was nothing else I could do to change my diet, and I still wasn't healthy. And food can only help you to an extent. There's the lifestyle, there's the stress, there's, the coaching side of it that you guys talked about earlier, but there's also the medicine side of it. And when you need high levels of iodine to help fix a thyroid problem, things like that, you can't eat enough iodine in food to get you the therapeutic dose that you need in order to get you back on track. Things like that's one example. But, I really wanted to be able to really dive in there and do more than just let me help you fix your diet. So it was far deeper than that for me. And so I'm excited that my practice is officially launching in June. So
congratulations.
Thank you. So it'll be hopewellnessla.com, and that'll be up. I have select clients that I see right now, since I'm, transitioning into starting a business, I only take on certain clients, but I'm really excited to be getting started and helping people with that deeper level.
Well, and I'm so glad that you brought up like the technical piece of like, or making it practical of like, what do you want your days to look like? And that's what I mean by this stuff, right? Like you have to really think about this. And granted, it can shift and change, but it will guide your educational choices, right? Because there's 1,000 out there, but when you really get clear on what questions you want to answer, how you want to help, and how you want to spend your days, the choices narrow pretty quickly, which I think is...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And, I think it also knowing you, it matches your personality really well, right? To get into those details and like precision. And it's like, I'm so big picture and I'm like, oh my God, how do these structures and the emotional stuff? And, I'm so happy that there's people like they're out there like you that I can then refer to, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like crazy analytical and it's super nerdy. And I didn't even know until I went back to school, almost 2 years ago, just how much of a science nerd I actually was. And my husband starts making fun of me. He's just like, you are such a nerd. And I'm like, I didn't know.
Well, and I think this is kind of piggybacks off of Tashmika's point, but it's like when we're in undergrad, we're forced to pick like these subjects that we don't even know if we're going to be interested in. I feel like I just figured out, like our niece turned like 26 and I like, we wished her a happy birthday. And I'm like, if you're really lost, you're doing your 20s right.
That's exactly right. I know. I mean, I went back to school at 33 years old. So, it's never too late. There are people in our program who are, 10, 15 years older than me. I mean, it's never too late.
Yeah. But once you can really know who you are and how you want to spend your days, you can pick a program that really targets that. And I think that's the most important thing because we're all going to be working until we're 80, folks. No, maybe not. All right. So thanks, Autumn. And Autumn, one more question. How did you decide? Because there are other programs that will let you pick labs. I know that University of Connecticut at Bridgeport is virtual, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's
How
right.
did you
they
decide?
have a both in-person and virtual program.
Okay. And was it mainly because I know that's one of the major programs that will allow you to order blood work and stuff. Was that kind of like your deciding factor?
That was a deciding factor. There's less than a dozen, I think, distance learning, functional medicine related nutrition programs. And so what I did is I looked at the most reputable ones that I heard people chattering about, and I compared their course list. And I just really liked the way that Bridgeport had laid out their coursework. Additionally, they had something called a virtual clinic at the very end of the program, which gives you hands-on experience and over 200 hours towards your CNS license. And that just made so much sense for me. So that and the course list really interested me the way they laid out the program, and it answered some of the questions I needed answers to in order to practice the way I wanted to. So that was just a really good fit for me.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. And now we have Eva, who is in the yoga world and is in corporate. So Eva, how did you come to yoga and what are you thinking?
Well, I'm probably at a quite a different point than everyone else is. So I'm quite fresh to this. I've only really gotten into the whole wellness world in the past probably 2 years, and I'm working in corporate. I do digital marketing, which is kind of couldn't be further from what I want to do now. And I did my yoga teacher training last year, which was kind of funny that I never saw myself doing that, but I'd been practicing yoga for probably 10 years before. Yeah, one day my boyfriend just said, why don't you become a yoga teacher? And I was like, well, I never actually considered that option. And then I asked my a yoga teacher at the time that I really liked practicing with, and she recommended a training. And when I reached out to the teacher that taught that, she said, oh yeah, well, we're starting in 3 days. and then that kind of, so I had to make a decision on the spot, and I did it, and it was a really great thing to do. But now it's kind of difficult working in corporate and being like, oh my God, what do I do now? Like, do I quit my job and become a full-time yoga teacher? Or I'm still at the point where I'm trying to decide which path to actually go down, because I know that I want to teach yoga, but probably not full-time. And I know that I'm really interested in functional medicine as well, but then there's so many options to look at. And then there's the whole psychological piece. So at the moment, I almost feel like I want to do a degree in nutrition and in physiotherapy and in psychology, and that just doesn't exist. So so I just started teaching yoga in my office, which took me a long time to get to as well. And so now I'm at the point of where to from now and which educational path can I go from here and which one can I actually do financially without having to give up my job, because I kind of can't do that. Yeah, so that's where I'm at the moment.
Well, no, and this is where I was 12 years ago, right? Like I was started to heal myself, and I was in the corporate world, and I was like, I had to sell my car to go back to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. There wasn't the programs and all the choices that there were now. So I think most people are where you are. And so do you have any questions for our panel? And I give you, and I just want to say one thing though. What I love about your path is very similar to mine, is that like, I just kept following what interested me next. And then eventually I kept circling the same type of things, right? Like, even though you think marketing is so separate, like you're into psychology, right? Like, it's like, okay, I clearly have that interest. And we'll talk a little bit about transitioning, because I was like you, I couldn't go to school full time. I couldn't just, quit my job and stuff. So you're at a place where I think a lot of people are.
Yeah. And then the other thing is also that I actually do enjoy marketing, and there's also a piece in helping people whose business I believe in, like you, for example.
Thanks.
So like, there's the whole thing that people in the wellness world shy away from marketing a lot, and I'd love to change that and just help bring a lot of things to light that don't get the reach that it deserves at the moment. So, but I guess the question is, if I think about all those degrees, I guess how important do you think credentials really are? So how much, because I guess it builds, like, you get a lot of trust from your clients when you have a bachelor in nutrition, and I don't know if it's good enough if I do that and I don't have a bachelor in nutrition, but maybe only do the health coaching online course. So yeah, I guess the question is, how important do you think it is to have the title?
I think that's such a great question. I'll answer, and then Autumn's raising her hand. So this is what's interesting about healthcare as it's changing, right? Like here in the States, I know you're in Australia. I don't know what it's like, but people have gotten tired of paying just for testing and not getting results, right? They're like, especially women, my doctor dismisses me, or I go in for blood work and they can't find anything. And so I found early on, and when I first started, I didn't have a master's degree. I went to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and we were called health counselors back then. Like a lot has changed. And I found that people will pay for results. Right? So they don't care as much about the credentials. Having said that, again, it depends on what part of wellness you want to land in, right? Like if you're like Autumn Autumn had a really intricate health history, right? She needed all that testing and whatnot. I found that for the people that are like me, they need to learn to do the basics, like getting good sleep, eating whole foods, and managing their stress. And it was this emotional component that I was fascinated by. And at the time, I was getting people results without the master's degree, because this was such a new concept. I don't want to say so new of a concept, but people were actually looking at this stuff. I do think, though, that having my master's degree has made me get better results. And it has given me, and this is like full on confession, I was deciding between two programs in Philadelphia. One was actually at an osteopathic medicine school, and one was at Penn. And I was like, I have a feeling I'm going to be finding some crazy shit. So I'm going to go to Penn because it has a more reputable name. People will trust you if you're doing crazy stuff. And I needed to, and so that's why I did that, right? Like that's a full on confession. And it was a program that let me really pick and guide my own interests. And it was in the liberal arts school, which is really important because it taught me how to think and learn about identity, which ultimately proved to be a core issue that I work on with. So it also gave me confidence to know what I was doing and take the risks in coaching. So that's my answer when it comes to, especially working with like the delicate nuance of people's like emotional terrain. So, but Autumn had her hand up, so I'll let her answer that.
I have a marketing degree. That's my undergraduate degree. So I will assure you that no matter what path you go in, you will absolutely use that marketing degree, because already in, starting a practice, I'm using my marketing degree a lot. So, you'll never leave it behind. I'll tell you that right now. But it really depends too on your legal structure in your local area. So for instance, in the state of California, I'm not required to have a license in order to practice nutrition. But I have a friend in, I believe it's either Connecticut or Delaware, who is required to have a license before she could do the nutritional counseling. So it really depends on kind of your local laws. So that's something that you're going to want to find out. Secondarily, what is it that you want to focus on? Like if nutrition is the big piece, but you also want to be able to address the psychological component, then doing the training in nutrition first and learning some of those things, you can start working with clients, and then tacking on a health coaching program certification or training or private training even with someone, like Allie, would be.
I didn't want this to be a big commercial for me.
No, but it's something that you do, and it's something that you're really good at, and you have a great system. And, I say that with total genuineness, that learning from people who know how to do that can add to your core practice. So, focusing on one core thing and then adding the coaching to it and the yoga piece to it and the, whatever else to it is kind of what you want to look at, in my opinion. So start with the core. And then I think we have this habit of wanting to do everything at once. So for me, I really want to do health coaching too, because I think I'll be more effective as a functional medicine clinician if I understand the psychological side. But I physically can't do it all at once. I can't do my master's degree and start a practice and do health coaching certification all at one time. So I have to be okay with the path that I'm on and being like, I will get to that. I will get to that. And I will do the best that I can. I'll read books. I emailed Allie not that long ago and said, hey, send me some books that I can read that will help me with the coaching piece before I can do like a certification program, because I really need that, So I think looking at it from those angles, I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of how the analytical person I am, that's kind of how I would approach it.
And that's what part of kicked off this podcast, because we were laughing at what they were telling you about how behavior change worked in your book. Remember, we were like, you like in your program, you're like, this is not how people change.
Oh, it was ridiculous. I was like, this is, and I actually, in the course evaluation, I actually said something about it and was like, either you need to spend more time like really fleshing this out with modern techniques to approach this, or you need to not have it in this course at all, because it was like a week of the overall course. I was like, no, this is not useful.
Tashmika, you had wanted to chime in?
Yeah, so another consideration, I think all of that that you guys said is true. Sorry, I just had a coughing fit. Now my voice feels all weird, because why not? When is the perfect time to have your voice go all wonky? The other thing that I did when I was starting the organization is I sat down and I had a long talk with myself about what I cannot do. And I think it was really important to me, because it also helped me build my team. And so for a nonprofit, of course, you have your board and you have volunteers. And so I knew that I was qualified through my experience to do certain things, but I also knew that there was other stuff that even if I wanted to, even if I was super passionate about some aspect of this organization, I love yoga. I actually joke that I'm a yoga evangelist, even though I'm not a teacher. I don't have the training. So that helped me kind of understand that I needed someone who could do that piece. And I could still be a part of that program, and I very much am, and I can still go out and build community around awareness and education that this is an important piece of healing our bodies, but I couldn't be the one to teach it, which actually is kind of a blessing, because if I could do every piece of this organization, I'd probably put myself in the grave trying to do it. So I think it's a really good, there's a moment where, you just have to really sit yourself down and just say, okay, what is the thing that if I cannot do it, that I won't be happy? Like, there are pieces of it that you absolutely won't be able to let go of. And that's the piece that you need to stay focused on. And then the rest of it, you can build up through contractors or staff or a partnership. Like, that's why, it takes all kinds.
I love that. Yeah. Coming back to, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about, like, when you go to these web pages of these programs, like, what this feels like, oh my God, I would love to learn that, right? Versus like kind of an undergrad, you're like, I've got to take these prereqs, versus like, what would I love to do? And just for everyone listening, I would highly recommend checking out Andrea Nakayama's program. And also Chris Kresser has just opened up a new health coaching program. It's brand new, but like Jennifer said, he's a very trusted source in the functional space. And they are covering, like, I would say functional medicine and they're doing positive psychology and motivational interviewing. I'll get to my thoughts on that. I think that's great to get people started. I don't necessarily, so that's also, so go to those web pages and see like, hey, this sounds exciting to learn. Like I would actually want to spend money and time learning this, I think is a good.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you specifically as well, Ali, because so I'm doing Truth with Food with you at the moment, and one of the deciding factors actually to get into that was also that you mentioned on your podcast that you were going to license it. So that was one of the things why I'm
waiting for it too. I'm waiting.
Yeah, I am. Well, part of that is, and not to throw like another variable in, but I was just listening to the head of Google's learning and training, and so they do a lot of coaching, and they were talking about the future of coaching. And they were saying that this accountability model of coaching is going to be, it's not just radiologists who are going to be outsourced through artificial intelligence. Coaching is going to be outsourced through apps. And they said even helping people grow their business, right? A lot of health coaches end up becoming like business coaches or like but this accountability model of like looking for feedback and stuff is going away because an app is going to be able to do that. It's going to be able to give you all the data and it's going to be able to hold you accountable. It's going to connect you to communities. And what he was saying, the future of coaching is what my process already is. Hello. Can women just take over already? Like, not just me, all of you guys.
Hold my beer.
Yeah. Gluten or your cider, right? Gluten free.
Yeah. I like to hold my own beer, but
Love it. But he was like, the future of coaching is really getting to these root cause resolutions and helping people deal with the complexity of their lives and the situation and making new meaning from things, which is what my work does. And he mentioned Robert Keegan. There's also Lisa Leahy who goes along with him, but their book, and it's what I sent to Autumn, Immunity to Change, is really going to be the future of coaching, which is what Jennifer's learning, what Autumn will move on to. I mean, we still need people to help us with the nutrition aspect, but coaching, if you take the coaching aspect out of anything, a lot of that is going to be digitized and used through machine learning. So that's another thing to think about. Like, where's the market going? Because healthcare is changing. I mean, for better or for worse, there's going to be for-profit. I mean, who knows if we'll get to single payer or whatever, but someone's still going to have to be paid and reimbursed. So that's another thing to think about. So yes, I'm definitely licensing my program. I'm just slower to the draw because it's a little bit more complex. And that's what a lot of health coaching will start with. Motivational interviewing and positive psychology is really hot right now. And those things I think are like the gas. They're like, they orient us, they get us motivated, they help us really get clear on our intentions. But then the Truth with Food work is really the break. Okay, I've started, I'm excited. And then like the minute something goes off the rails. So we need both. But I think it's going to be a lot harder to outsource the break stuff because it deals with the complexity and the context of someone. Who knows? I could be wrong and have my own blind spots because I want to still have a job. So take it for what it's worth.
Yeah. And to caveat off that too, Chris Kresser has a book. I mean, obviously I'm a big fan too, Unconventional Medicine, that just came out and I read it. And he talks about his theory on the future of healthcare and how health coaches would be involved in that. So if that's something that people are interested in, I think that's a great book to pick up and sort of see, a pretty educated and an intellectual view of what that might look like in the future.
Yeah, well, especially, so look at that stuff. And then you can, I'm a big fan of like getting all the data, looking at it, let it settle. And then like the answers do come and see where you're excited. Because that's, no matter what, transition careers, you have to have stamina. Like it's just, so you want the enthusiasm to regenerate itself.
Girl, and I swear you could do anything. Like seriously, I get up at 5 a.m. every day to do my graduate work. And then I spend all day homeschooling, so, and like, I can't do it any other way, so you will find a way. People will find a way.
Well, and that's what I think is exciting about being in wellness or having a meaningful career. You may feel depleted and exhausted at the end of the day, but you still want to get back up, do it the next day, because it is very fortifying. All right. So I want to move on to a couple more questions. So one of the questions I get is, how do you overcome feelings of not being ready enough or healthy enough to really kickstart your business? So if you want to go the more business route or the nonprofit route, basically being on your own, which Eva's still the question mark, but that's good. And I love that you're starting in corporate though, because that was a big, thing for you. Is like, wait, I can start to do this now. I don't have to wait. And I think getting practice is so important in the beginning. And I would also recommend, just to kind of piggyback on terms of education, try to get mentored or from someone. I was in someone's office who was Philadelphia's leading functional medicine practitioner. I mean, it was really hard to find functional medicine practitioners back then. This was 12 years ago. And she mentored me. I mean, I paid for office in her space, but she mentored me for 4 years. And so and then when I was in grad school, my professors were helping me with coaching. There was no formal person at the time, but now there is. So everyone, you guys, like when I say this took me 12 years, it's because there was really no infrastructure and there's so many choices now, which is really exciting. But I think part of the feeling not ready enough is because we really do, you always have to start before you're ready, but you also actually do need real skills. And that's something that is very scary to me in the coaching industry in general. People will say, fake it till you make it. And you can't do that when you're dealing with people's health. So you're never going to feel ready enough, and you want to have a supervisor or a mentor or something to help you when those things get critical or when those things get messy. And that's one thing I think that the traditional educational system does really well. Okay, you're going to do a practicum, you're going to do a mentorship or something before you just go out there. And in terms of healthy enough, I hear this a lot. When I first started, I was not talking about emotionally eating. I was still emotionally eating at night and when things got crazy, but I was just helping people with the food piece. And I think it's really important, two things. As long as we're further along than our clients, I think that's really important because there's this idea that you will at one point, be healthy enough. And health just isn't static. It's always shifting and changing. And I think the best healers actually have the best questions, not the best answers. And so it doesn't mean that you can't have acumen and skill sets. But I think this idea that we're at one point going to be super healthy and have all the answers just isn't true. I even think of my integrative physician. She sends me clients in Philly. I went to her when I was in Philly. I remember working with her and she had a horrible bike accident in the middle of it. And she was so, like, she was doing everything and learning. She was on her own learning edge of trust in her body and stuff. And like her sharing with that with me just made me like her even more because if someone tells me they have all the answers, I run because I'm like, the people who feel like they have imposter syndrome, if you think you have imposter syndrome, you don't, because you can reflect and you're discerning versus the people who think they know everything, never question, right? Which is very scary because life is really complex and mysterious. So Jennifer, I would love to start with you about how you started to feel, oh my God, I'm going out on my own, which is, even though you have a traditional medical background, it's so different when it's you, your name, or as they would say in the biz, your brand. So how you said this is where I'm starting, which is what I love because you're starting. So do you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, I mean, I am literally just starting, but I think one of the great things about Andrea's program is she really pushes practicing, and not practicing without having any knowledge, but practicing working with people. And generally, once you have gone through some type of nutrition program, you are going to know more than most of the people that are coming to you. You're going to know more about their body. And one of the big pieces of our training is educating people about what's going on in their bodies, which really can help with the motivation factor too and follow through. And so I think getting that message over and over again of just getting out there and start practicing, that's what's helped me kind of get over the hump of, oh no, I need to gather more information. Maybe I need to go to a coaching program because I've never done any traditional coaching certification or whatnot. And I was actually thinking today about this podcast and reflecting on how much in my career as a nurse practitioner, I really did a lot of education with patients and collaborating with other practitioners. So I don't know, I mean, coaching would probably be super helpful for me, but I have some experience in that. And so I can bring that into working with new clients and patients. And so I think that's one of the big things is just that message of you don't necessarily need to keep gathering more and more and more and more information, but it's working with people is what's going to give you the experience. And I found that to be true even with nursing. Like I came out of nursing school and nurse practitioner school, and I had a foundation of knowledge, but it didn't give me the experience of actually working one-on-one with patients and how to do that and how to talk to other providers. That just comes with experience.
I'm so glad you brought that out because, again, back to traditional academia, like even when I was learning these, coaching theories or change management theories, and as tough as it was to go to grad school while building my business, it was like, okay, I learned this theory and then you try it on someone and it's like, whoa, but they're bringing all these other things. And so that real world experience develops intuition, empathy. And I think one of the things that you said that was really important that I just want to kind of draw out is as healers, as foundation founders, we are not fixing anyone, right? We're really trying to create a space for them to tap into their own resources and resilience. And that takes a lot of pressure off. And so when you realize that, you realize your work is to do your own work so you can be with them in that discomfort. Yes, have the acumen, that is for sure. But it's really about deep listening and empathy and helping guide on the side versus kind of rescuing and fixing. So I'm glad you brought that out. And you really get that as you start to practice and work with real people. Right?
Oh, yeah. Because especially if you try to rush to do things and try to fix, it never works. I mean, just in general, in life in general. And I definitely learned through your program too, Allie, how important questioning and inquiring and being curious, that gets you so much more information, and it helps people feel like they're being heard and seen, which is at least half of it, if not 3/4 of the healing process, is being with somebody and hearing what they are experiencing more than trying to fix it.
Yeah, no, that it's so true. Because I mean, being seen in our imperfection and in our struggle is so healing. So I'm glad you brought that up. Tashmika, I'm curious, like you decide to start this foundation. I love it. You have like, no, like you're just like, I'm going to do it. Like, did imposter syndrome come up, or how did you like start all that?
I didn't just start it, like, I think that that's another thing that we have to talk about. Like, no one just wakes up and is like, I'm going to start a nonprofit organization. I mean, it was like, I did the math after I was sitting here thinking about it specifically just for this question, because it was 15 years between the first time I ever participated in a grassroots organizing movement until I started this, till now. So like there were 10 years, so that, where I was volunteering. And actually one of the things that I tell people, if they have the capacity before they would ever even consider starting any kind of nonprofit, is to find somewhere similar to do the work, because a lot of people assume there are gaps and there aren't, or the gaps are just a lack of capacity. Like someone really wants to do what you're thinking about, but the organization doesn't actually have capacity to do that thing. And sometimes you'll discover a gap and then you can go and start a nonprofit. But I think definitely do have moments where I'm like, what have I gotten myself into? This seemed like a good idea at the time.
Hindsight's always 20/20.
Am I ever going to sleep again? Like constantly hustling. But I believe that what I am creating is useful. And I believe that because I know that it's what I would have wanted. And I know that it's what a lot of other adult survivors would have wanted for themselves as a child. And so there's this quote from Audre Lorde that's like, when I follow my vision, I'm going to totally butcher it. So good luck Googling it later. But it's like, if you following your vision, then it becomes less and less important whether or not you're afraid. And I think that that was like the quote that was on my wall when I started this organization, because it wasn't about being afraid. It was about responding to a need that I felt was critical. And so I think that if you come from a place where you do feel like this is a critical need, you can be open to the fact that you're wrong, right? Like and which shouldn't be hard. If you already have imposter syndrome, like you already think you're wrong. Like half the time, you're halfway there. So if you're open to the fact that you could be wrong, then, you just kind of do it. And then when things show up that you're not doing right, then you learn from it and you keep moving. I tell people all the time that I am constantly looking for my ride into the sunset moment. Like when the problem's solved and I can be like, well, everybody, I did my best, but there's no need for us anymore. And then I can go find, something else to do. But I think if we're constantly attentive to like our vision and that critical need, and then also being attentive to the fact that you could be wrong about what you're trying to offer, and be willing to shift in a different direction, I think that's a recipe for like staying grounded in your work and staying grounded in the reality is that none of us really know what we're doing. Like, when are we going to start admitting that nobody knows what they're doing? Like, people with degrees don't know what they're doing. Parents don't know what they're doing. People that don't have children don't know what they're doing. Like, none of us fucking have a clue. So I think as long as we're all like together on the fact that we're just all trying, I actually was joking with a friend that I want that on my tombstone. Like, I'm just trying not to fuck it up. Like, just every day of my life. That's what I'm trying to do. So put that on my tombstone. We'll call it a day.
Well, I love, again, this kind of reiterates the point and it accentuates it more of like, we all have skill sets that we're bringing to this. The same way that Eva is in marketing and understands psychology and all this stuff, like that helps her with yoga, right? And then whatever her next steps are, like we're all like Autumn, her individual experience, Jennifer, like her, oh my God, I was listening and being a healer as a nurse practitioner, right? Like I might not have called it that, but it was the same capacity. And so for all of us, we're not like just beginning. It's like I always tell people like, what have you kind of kept returning to in the same fashion? It may have been dressed up differently, right? But like I was in PR and I joked in the beginning, I'm like, I'm just a PR person for fruits and vegetables now. Like I'm not, you know what I mean? Because they don't have a marketing budget, which is why, you know, they're not on TV. Like, so.
Yeah, I mean, I worked with youth. I mean, when I was growing up and I was going through therapy for my own stuff, it wasn't actually therapy. It was like, you know, church counseling or whatever. I remember thinking I could totally open a home for girls. And then this is so random, but we'll share it and you can decide to cut it later if you want to. But I remember singing with the middle school choir and I was in high school and I was like, I actually don't like kids that much, so I probably won't do that. You know, and then, right? Like there's all these experiences with, you know, deciding that I wasn't going to go into child development because if I was going to raise kids, I wasn't going to work with them during the day. You know, like I just didn't want both. And so I think there's all of these spaces where we navigate toward closer and closer to what it is that we want to do. If we're paying attention to how things feel and how things show up in our world, then it kind of, you know, if we're paying attention to our insight, it does tend to guide us towards where we need to be. And actually, I don't work with kids every day. I am around kids all the time in my work, but I'm not a therapist. I didn't go that route. I didn't get a child development degree, but I do get the gift of watching them heal, which I think is amazing. And I do get to tell their stories and I do get to advocate for them, whether it's government or whether it's within our community, I get to advocate for them. And so I get to do all of these things that's very connected to lifting up youth and protecting youth and healing youth, but not like it's not the way that, you know, all of these different paths that other people or even myself might have thought it would have been, you know, all these years, you know, ago.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point of like basically see what like gives you energy back. Like you'll have the sights and sound, or I forget how you phrased it better, but like if you're awake and paying attention, you'll start to notice where you gravitate. And it's almost like it starts out big, but then you know, narrowing it and stuff. So I think that's really great. All right, one more question because this is kind of a big one because I don't want to keep you guys too long is the other question that I get all the time, and again, what prompted a couple came in the week that I decided, like I emailed all of you guys, and like, will you be willing to come on? Was, can you give any advice about how to properly transition from juggling 2 jobs to fully supporting yourself as a full-time healthcare practitioner? Like any words of wisdom or things to look out for? And I love this topic because entrepreneurship has become a passionate topic about because it's helped heal me from uncertainty as much as chemo did to cure me from cancer. So I love this topic. I want to give my 2 cents and then I want, you know, you guys to talk about what you're thinking or what your plans are. So a couple things. First of all, the healthcare field and health coaching is growing. The wellness field, we are in a time, hopefully we're going to take this mess that we are in and all heal from it. So there's only going to be more demand, right? I think we're finally starting to realize how sick our culture is and the demand is growing. The numbers are there, everything. So this is a great time to want to be in this field. Having said that, if you do go the entrepreneurship solo practice route, there's a lot of, I have so many opinions, I'm not going to give them all today, but there's a couple of things that I want everyone to know. And first thing is, I only learned this in like 10 years into my business, but 80% of people who go into entrepreneurship, they were trying to study them. They said, oh, do they have more tolerance for risk? Are they more creative or whatever? No, wah, wah, wah. It turned out 80% of people had family money. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, I didn't have that. And I was totally naive and I burnt myself out trying to make things work because I didn't know that. So I share that. You're laughing, but I went from feeling like, why is this taking so long to I'm amazing, like overnight, right? So I just share that because we look at these entrepreneurship stories, and they tend to not be in the health field. But if you look at all these women empowerment groups and stuff, a lot of these people, if you have family money, you also have family connections, right? I'm not saying that's how everyone does their job, but I'm just saying we have to be realistic with actually transitioning. And so that's why I think if I had to do over now with the infrastructure that's there, I would go work for someone else for a couple of years so that I could really start to focus, learn the educational path I wanted to go. But that's where I would start, is working for someone else, because I would have needed the income. I mean, I was putting my grad school on credit cards, interest free, and just carrying over balances. And it was really stressful. And you don't want the stress of I never followed any of the marketing people who had a formula for closing people or selling them, because that just, luckily I found out my clients don't like that either. But a lot of people will try to sell you on, there's a formula for closing people and whatnot. And you'd never want to feel pressure to have to just get clients and get them in when people aren't really ready to work with you. That's my personal opinion. This is obviously biased, but I found that if people aren't ready, it's going to frustrate you. You're going to start to doubt your skills. And then the person is going to be frustrated with themselves as well. So my words of advice would be, go work for someone else, get that stability, get better. You're going to learn so much in your first couple of years that will change your trajectory. The second thing I want to offer is from a business building standpoint. I'm going to give you a couple resources, but you will find people out there that are going to try to sell you the same way that people try to sell you lose 30 pounds in 30 days. People are going to try to sell you $10,000 in 10 days or whatever. It's the same exact thing, magical thinking. And I really didn't spend a lot of money on my business until investing in it as a business, really until 3 years ago. That was 9 years in. Now, granted, I was creating something alongside. Times have changed. Again, there's different infrastructure now. But I see that a lot of people will invest in these programs. They'll take all the little bit of money that they have. They spend it on marketing rather than mastery. So start with the mastery and then go with the marketing, but really get good, because once you get good at what you do, then you can figure out how to package things in a way that are really effective for clients and for yourself. But do that foundational work first, and don't follow those people. I had to unfollow them because for a while I doubted myself. And then I just realized people will tell you that they're bringing in all this money or whatever, but they don't tell you how much they're spending. And if you don't have a lot to spend, it's not what people make, it's what you bring home. And if you are for me, I was the sole provider. I mean, I lived with Carlos, but he was on fellowship. And if you've ever been with someone on a fellowship, they basically make less than minimum wage. They don't have to pay for grad school, but they basically make less than minimum wage. And so it was really stressful for me. And I wish if I would have to do it over, I would have done it that way. I'll give you guys some great business resources that are efficient at the end, but I first want to hear everybody else's thoughts on this. So Autumn, we'll start with you, because I know that you're starting to get clients right now as you end school.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that people think. I talked to one of my classmates, and she's kind of trepidatious about starting anything because she's like, I need to know all the information first before I can get started. And that's not necessarily accurate, depending on the scope of your business. So I started with basic nutritional counseling before I started moving into some of the deeper level stuff, because I've kind of been doing it as I've learned it. So that enables me to change my pricing structure and how many clients I'm bringing on and all that kind of stuff. Additionally, my husband and I have sat down and made a long-term plan. So the goal is for me to be full-time by 2021, which sounds crazy stupid because you're like, it's 2018. How are you even thinking about 2021? And that sounds so far away, but that's how we've had to look at it in terms of goal planning. Here's where I want to be by the end of year 1. Here's where I want to be at the end of year 2. Here's how much money I have to make per week. How can we realistically make that happen by gradually building my practice while I'm finishing up a graduate degree? So, it's just kind of that step-by-step mentality and being okay with it being a journey and not being afraid to have a side hustle. Also,
well, I love that you talked about actually putting concrete stuff down. It doesn't mean that everything will go as planned, but in the field,
it certainly won't. It won't at all. But somewhere in there, at least you have a direction, right?
Yeah, I just health straddles wellness and personal development, right? So you get all these different messages, and I find that there's a lot of magical thinking of oh well, you're not charging what you're worth. First of all, none of us we're priceless. Like, don't put a value on your paycheck as how you are as a human being, And then I hear these people like law of attraction. If you want it enough, I think one of the best memes I've ever seen on social media, and I don't know who created it, but it was like, maybe you manifested it. Maybe it's white privilege. And I was like, yes, that is golden and I would even say white upper class privilege. I mean, granted, I have a ton of privilege being white. However, not all of us have the same economic means. And I started to realize that a lot of people who were talking about this, like, oh, if you put it out there, they actually didn't have to put any plans in place, and they just had they were putting out cash, which it takes money to make money.
Cash is not manifestation.
Right.
I mean, I guess it kind of is.
Yeah. But I just share that because we straddle this world, and often, it's a marketing technique to make people think that you have a secret that they haven't figured out, and if you learn from them, and I mean, I've never purchased any of that, but it certainly made me doubt myself in those early days because I was like, I didn't know all of this back end of stuff, right? And
Absolutely.
So I just don't want people to get burnt out before they even get started or for the longevity. So putting those plans in place, Autumn, is really, really important so that you have a realistic expectation of what it's going to take. And then that will help structure your business model.
Right. And I'm talking to professionals in my industry doing the things that I'm doing and getting advice from them, particularly in terms of what do people charge for this kind of service. And the numbers that they were throwing out at me, like, this is what you need to charge because this is at minimum what you're worth with your education. I was like, I don't even know if I could afford me. Like, are you serious? And you have to have confidence in yourself. You have to have confidence in what you can do. And so even though that seems like a scary thing, I mean, it's really not as scary as it sounds. You just got to get out there and you just got to kind of get your feet wet.
Yeah.
I mean, for consultations for me now, I actually charge quite a bit. And I always say, if they say no, I get to stay home. I mean, I definitely of course, want to make extra money. Sometimes you do charge. I mean, my husband is a tile installer. And so that's what he does. If a client is really challenging or difficult in a way that he knows he's going to have to work a little extra harder, if the job is hard for whatever reason, he always adds a little bit. And he's like, if they say no, then I don't have to do the job. And if they say yes, then I feel compensated for the hard work. And so that's kind of been my frame of reference now for consultation. Now, obviously the nonprofit is different. We write grants and I get paid a set amount for, doing the work that I do. When I started the organization, I wasn't getting anything, but then my board started giving me $300 a month, which it was funny. My treasurer wouldn't even call it a salary. She was like, your stipend.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was just a little something. And, as we were able to build our budget through fundraising, I was able to actually get paid. But that's the other thing that I tell people too, because, people who start nonprofits and entrepreneurs, because it's it's one and the same. It's just a different way of getting funded. It's like, we just get up in the morning and we eat our luxurious breakfast by the beach, at 9 a.m. because we don't have to drive anywhere. And we open our inbox and it just, all of this work.
All opportunities.
Yeah, it's just opportunities. And we just network and we can have cocktails at 4 p.m. because it's like Mad Men, people think about, and I know that I did the same thing. I remember starting to be I can do whatever I want with my day, which depending on who you are, that could be a significant problem if you can do whatever you want with your day. And so I think that's the other thing that people need to understand is I was really lucky. I had a partner who was working, who was supportive, who was a partner who parented. So we weren't in this kind of patriarchal relationship where I was the one who had to strap my kids on my back to go and do all of my work. My husband is 100% a parent. And so I was able to do a lot of things that not everybody is equipped in not only in their financial life, but in their family life to be able to take a step away from their family and build a nonprofit or build a business. And I think that that's something we have to talk about, specifically when we talk about women, specifically when we talk about women with children, that, my kids have definitely been strapped to my back to go to things. They have definitely been to way too many workshops workshops on consent and sexual assault at their age. But, I did have a lot of support, and I also had a lot of community support and a lot of people in my community that supported me. And not everybody starts from that space. And so I think that's another kind of, like I talked about earlier, where you have to kind of do your audit of your skills. You also need to do an audit of like, who's going to be in your corner? Are you going to have a side hustle? What kind of time can you actually commit when you do have a full-time job to build your business? I mean, those are all things that I feel that I was very privileged. And also, Allie, my husband's white, so I do call him my white privilege.
That is fantastic. Oh my gosh.
I feel so naive when I first started dating Carlos. I mean, even though he's considered Latino and an immigrant, he presents as white. Actually, people, when they first met him, they're like, he doesn't look like a Carlos. I'm like, oh my God. But I feel so naive. Like when we first started dating, like I remember we were living in Philly and we went to City Sports and we both got tennis shoes, and he had to wait for his to be called in from the back. And they were like, oh, we'll give you 20% off since you had to wait. And I started noticing him getting all these things. And I was like, oh, it must be Carlos. And then like, as I like got savvy, I'm like, it's because he's a dude. It's not Carlos. Like he gets all these discounts. Like we would call on things. I would call and wouldn't get the rate. He would call and like get a better rate for things. It's infuriating. Like, I mean, I love Carlos and people love him, but it's being a dude. So yeah.
Calling the manager, I call it calling the manager. I think that's it's so nice to be able to just call the manager in any situation and be like, I will not stand for it. I was like, honey, if I even tried that, they would laugh me out of this place so fast.
Yeah. I'm like, you do all the negotiation because
he does. Yeah.
This.
Absolutely. So I think it's really important to recognize, not everybody, most people starting a nonprofit or starting a business don't do it from a place, like you said, of having a ton of financial support, familial support, and a ton of privilege, And so I think on the flip side of that too, I think it makes me more cognizant of where I'm spending my money too. Like when I think about all of the people of color in my community that own businesses, that are entrepreneurs, and all the women and, all the trans, queer, like those are the people that I try to do my shopping with, right? Because I'm the same. I am very much reliant on people deciding to support a grassroots, community-driven, led by a Black woman who is a survivor to be able to do my work. And so when I'm doing the same thing, when I'm looking at my contractors and the people that I want to work with, I'm doing the exact same thing because I do believe that, we're kind of starting from lower than everybody else. So if I have the opportunity to offer a little bit of privilege to somebody else, I'm going to do it.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. And that's why I think women need to be starting their own things, right? Because we tend to think like that. I mean, and again, I don't want to categorize all women and men because that's not always true. There's a lot of patriarchy with lipstick in the online world, like for sure. But I'm also glad that you brought about the thing about kids, because I remember being in grad school and I was like, even if I wanted to have a kid now, there's no way that I could. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. And Jennifer, I know that's something that like really affected your own work environment is you have 3 kids and one of them, like you said, started getting called with challenges. So how are you going to structure that based on the fact that you have other competing commitments?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing for me that I really had to come to terms with is that I have to start out small. Like my kids are still really young and I'm not going to be able to have 10 clients and work with 10 clients starting out. I might be able to manage 2 or 3 clients and then see how it goes. And it's taken a little while, and I got to talk with a lot of the other folks in my program around this, is just getting comfortable with that fact that I'm starting out small and that's okay. And I can have big dreams and I'll probably hopefully get there, but I have to start out small because my kids are still really in need and I only have so much time in the day.
But I would also reframe, because what you're saying is starting out small, is I'm thinking starting out profoundly. Like you're really in it to learn and to see what's working. And like, because sometimes people want to do entrepreneurship to like go big or go home or for the freedom or whatever. And you're actually doing it so that you can help people and support them. So, and learning so much in those first couple of years. And by taking it slow, you're going to be able to pay attention to things rather than trying to start whatever and, scale it and all that kind of stuff. So I don't really think there is starting out small. I think starting out is big in general.
Thank you.
It is. It's a big step and it takes courage. And, I had to have a conversation with my husband when I went back because we did have that I mean, I guess you would call it that typical patriarchal sort of, structure in our house where I stayed home and I took care of the cooking and cleaning and my daughter, and he went off to work, and that really it would be a huge sacrifice for him if I went back to school and I'm like, look, now I need help. Now I need you to jump in here. And he had to be okay with that. We had to get on the same page. Otherwise, we were going to fight every step of the way. That wasn't going to work out and be cool, So we had to do that. And the other thing I had to do, kind of, a little off topic, but I had to be okay with charging my friends money to talk to me when it comes to this advice. Because, I mean, y'all, I have like 1,000 friends on Facebook or something. I don't know. I'm getting, I'll make health comments and people are messaging me and asking me for advice. And I'm like, I don't have time. I physically don't have time. Like if you really want me to evaluate you, I have to charge you money.
Yeah.
Like, I just have to. And you just, it's being okay with that. I have, I can count on one hand the amount of people that I will not charge. And my husband and my mother are two of them.
and they probably won't listen to you. like my parents.
I'm the same way. I'm like, oh, hey, that's thanks for your questions. It costs about $75 an hour for a consultation. Let me know when you want to meet. Okay, bye, love you. And then we'll see what happens from there. Because again, I'm not necessarily, for me, in the position to even want to do one-on-one consultations. Like for me, that doesn't make sense for what I do. I want to be a part of culture change and culture shift. So I would rather spend my time and energy on doing doing conferences or big trainings for people who are in this work, or working on, obviously spending all of that energy on my own organization and building that. And so I tend to be a lot more, I tend to push those opportunities off, because I'd prefer, those don't build my vision. Like that's not my vision. Talking to one person to build their nonprofit or give them ideas on how to build their nonprofit is not really something that I feel really passionately about. But if they want to come and talk about how to end rape culture on their campus, or something like that, that's what I want to talk about. Those are the rooms that I want to be in.
That's such a good discernment tool for when you start to think about what you're offering, what not. Eva, what milestones, I mean, now that we've kind of had this talk, I know it's still fresh, but do you have any milestones in mind for yourself of all right, I even though I don't know if I even want to get full-time into wellness, are you socking away money on the side, or are you thinking
Well, for me, in the past few months especially, it's just been kind of coming out of that black and white thinking of I have to give up my job and do this full-time. So one of the main shifts for me was working with you, Ali, and I had this whole idea in my head of, oh my God, I found my purpose and I have to do this now. And then you said, your purpose is not this one thing, but it's actually living your values every day. And then that was a huge mindset shift of, oh my God, yes, I can actually do this every day. And also just taking it one step at a time. And then, all the little steps add up in the end. So I constantly just have to remind myself to be patient and take it one small step at a time, because I know that it will take a lot of time, but eventually I will get there, and I'll just have to work with what I've got right now. And so that's where I'm at right now.
Well, yeah. And plus, I mean, some of my first clients were the people that I used to work with in the corporate world. So it's we've talked about this. Sometimes there's this judgment of people in the corporate world, but they need help. They're often very open and they have money to pay for it. Right. So it's it can be a really good place to test out where all of us who are talking, we're ahead of our time, right? We're kind of oh, this is the cutting edge. But the market or the temperature of culture right now is still so far back there. And so that can often be amazing research and amazing starting points, because you'll catch the people who are kind of at the edge of the middle, and you may find you want to do it on a corporate level, right? It's you never know. But what I like is that you're integrating it day in and day out, just like Jennifer is going to do, just like Autumn's been doing, and even though Tashmeek and I are doing this full time, it's we're still taking it day by day, step by step too. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I've also come to see, I've worked in a very small business in the past year, and there's this thing that happens when you kind of work for yourself, is that you get really isolated from the real world. And so I've only been working in a big office again in the past 9 or 10 months, and that's a big shift as well. But it's also, that's what the real world is like that we're kind of a minority, right? And it's good to have that connection and just see where other people are at, and that not to get caught up in my little bubble of what I'm doing.
I'm glad you said that too, because again, coming back to how do we want to spend our days, Autumn talked about the lab aspect of this, but being self-employed is very isolating, and people need to think about that and consider that. I mean, it doesn't mean there isn't workarounds, but that's one of the times, again, in the early days, I was like, oh, if I could collaborate with a team, like I'd be so much happier. And you may have to create that for yourself. So there's a lot that goes around with, as Tashmika was saying, we're not waking up and like having some tea as we, push our hair back and like let the wind blow and like music in the background.
Yeah. There's not an entrepreneur Instagram filter that I found yet.
No, but that's one of the reasons too why part of my core business structure, in the long term plans to be a concierge level service, because I need to get out of the dang house.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I will add though too, that I have staff and it still can be really lonely, because at the end of the day, when you are the owner, when you are the person, the executive director, the person who's in charge of this ship that's kind of steering it all, you still have a lot of stuff that's on you, and not necessarily a weight that everybody is going to be lifting with you. And so I don't want to be a bummer, but that's the reality too, is that it does often kind of fall on you. So I think in addition to having a team, that you will eventually have, or be able to, do the workarounds where you work in co-working space, I think it's just really important to have people in your corner that are your friends that can listen to you moan about whatever. Because there's always something that's not quite going the way that you wanted it to, or someone was mean to you, or like there's always something to kvetch about. And to have people in your corner, I think is really important, because also I don't want to hang out with people that work in trauma all the time. You may not want to hang around yogis all the time when you start, there's a point where you want to be able to complain to people who don't necessarily understand, are going to be, are in that work. So they're a little more objective about what you're saying. I know for me, that's what I need sometimes, is to just have people be like, man, that does suck. And just be on my side, and not have to worry about the kind of intermingling of all of our professional lives mixing together,
Well, I'm laughing because try being in the coaching industry. Everyone wants to coach you, and you're like, no, I don't want to be coached right now. I just want to pitch. I don't want to make some sort of learning thing from this. Like, it's like there's not a bigger meaning here. I just am tired. So another thing I just want to say, and then we're going to wrap up here. But one of the things that I did that really helped grow my business, and also I didn't do it on purpose. It was just I was looking for office space in Philadelphia, but finding a place where there's other healthcare practitioners. There was a therapist, and there was a chiropractor, and a Pilates teacher, and an acupuncturist. And I wanted to go in there because I wanted to be around those type of people. But I got a lot of referrals, and that really helped me really quickly. It ended up not working out after 4 months because the therapist referred people to me, and they stopped seeing her, and then she wanted to double my rent. But that often, so ask about that stuff. But that was huge for me, is to be around other wellness practitioners, not only because I could learn from them and learn how they looked at things, but I also wasn't isolated. I'm clearly an extrovert, which is often a minority in the healing community. I find a lot of people are introverts, but it also helped grow my business relatively quickly because they got to know me, knew what I did, and trusted me. So that's also another key option for bridging if you're in between stuff. And I was still in the corporate world. I would get up in the morning. Sometimes I would go to clients, and then I would just see clients at night, and from like 7 to 10. And that was, yeah. I mean, when I say I worked like 7 days a week for like 10 years, I really did, because I was also in school. But, again, this is a different time and space. There's infrastructure now that there wasn't there. So, but I had that passion. I wanted people to know the truth of things. And so that kept me going. And I think that for all of us, kind of coming full circle, follow your curiosity, pay attention to what lights you up, what you need. And then I'm going to ask you guys for any parting thoughts, but I just want to give everyone some resources, some really low-cost resources, or I would say value-packed based on where you are. Tara Gentili runs a community called Co-Commercial, and Tara really honors that it's like building a business is an unending process, and it's a membership site where you learn from other people who are in the trenches with you and actually have real businesses, because I've also learned a lot of people in the online world don't necessarily have legit businesses. There's, again, no judgment. It's just they're they don't have an actual business model. So you want to learn from people who are actually doing that. And then in the beginning, when I started to actually work on like fine tuning my program pages and sales copy, is a woman named Tammy Smith of the Dawning Point. And she has like 30 years of like not only marketing, but training experience. And she really helped me figure out what skills I had, how I could package those in a way that would give my clients skills and communicate that in a way that was persuasive, because I tend to lead with, this is what I think. And that's not how you get people to vibrate. So she's a really great value and does not charge exorbitant fees. And then I just worked with Jack McNeil after a couple of years of trying little group I've run Truth with Food for 8 years, but I didn't work with someone on the sales aspect of that until 2014, believe it or not. Mm. So, and then I just worked with Jack McNeil on positioning. Once I had worked for 10 to 11 years, I was like, I have something that I really want to say here, and I want to invest money so that the design and everything is aligned according to my stake in the ground. But it took me 11 years to see that and be able to communicate that. So those are all some resources for you guys at various price points in various places. Because when you're starting out, you don't want to invest in something if you're not at the right stage, right? Like you don't need to invest in a positioning person if you're just starting out. But you might need to, invest in co-commercial because you want to know website, what's the best, Squarespace or WordPress, like all these questions. So just know that it can help you pace yourself financially. Okay, so any parting words? I know that I've kept you guys a little bit longer. Thank you so much for staying. Does anybody have any parting words or before we wrap up? Yeah, Jennifer.
I just want to say, like, instead of making it feeling like a big, huge decision of what road you're going to take or what education path you're going to take, even just doing that research is making a step towards what you want to do. So really owning that you are making a change or you're moving towards what you want to do, even if you're in the research phase of it. You don't have to actually be in a program.
I love that. That reminds me of how Tashmika says, like, when do we really start, right? It's like, okay, we've already been having our curiosities. Like, we're not out of the womb. Like, who are we, right? So I love that point. Yeah, just researching it. It's not like you have to commit right away. You're just gathering data and learning your preferences and maybe the curiosities that are still there, right? It's like, keep coming back to that question. So great point. Thank you.
When I was in high school, I had a choir teacher who told me the story that her husband, they had 4 kids at the time of the story. And one day he went out for bread, eggs, and milk, and he never came back. And she was like, okay, well, I guess I got to figure this out. So she became, she went to music school, got her degree, became a teacher. And she was just like, there's never a moment where you can't start over. Like there will never be a time. So then I graduate high school, and a few years later, I get an email from her. And now she has decided to go back to teaching art I don't know what she did, but she was then an art teacher. And then after that, she was writing books. Like she's writing these young adult fiction books. And so whenever I think about, feeling bad about where I am, or like if I'm never going to get to this phase, or this phase, I just always think about her, because I think about like the amount of resilience that she had, but also just that there is never, ever a period of time where you can't take a left instead of a right and just decide that you're going to go in a different direction. And that could be a 4 or 5 year period, but it's always within, your grasp to be able to make decisions to change course. And it's just always really inspiring to me to think of her whenever I'm in those moments of like, what am I going to do? I can do whatever I want. I'm a grown-up, so.
Yeah, and I think it gets to what Eva was talking about, black and white thinking. Like, oh my God, nothing is like so extreme that like I can't recover from it, or that it's so separate. Like I can just start where I am right now. Mm-hmm. I think is so important, whether it's researching or, like how we kicked off. Like, I'm already doing it wrong. What's not trying it, a little bit more?
Yeah, and it doesn't change as you go along too. It's like, I want to have 13 different elements on my website, but all I have right now is like, people need to contact me. Like, they need to submit something via email, and it's like, I want to have recipes and blog posts and like, I want all these things, but it's like a day at a time, just like Jennifer said, like researching and just starting that process is a day at a time. Once you even start the process, it's still a day at a time. Once you're at Allie's phase where you have an established business and you're trying to continue to develop it, it's still a day at a time. It just be okay with that process.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that too about the submit thing, because here's another thing. Like, yeah, we have to have a website and everything's online, but most people are going to find you through referrals. Like most people are still, I have integrated doctors, integrated psychiatrists, or people found me through like prevention or my podcast. But like, we think we have to have this big complicated website, but especially health in the beginning days, people are going to come via referrals, like other people who know you. So don't overcomplicate it. Like word of mouth is the best. And then your clients will start telling people word of mouth is still the best thing there is out there. Like, I mean, we need the internet's amazing. I mean, look at, we're all talking and all over the world here right now. And word of mouth is trust, right? So we've got to trust ourselves and leave with that. So thank you. Ava, do you have Eva, my pronunciation, you can speak like 3 languages and I'm like, I can't even pronounce English.
Any other takeaways? Oh, well, you guys have given me a lot of stuff to look into. So I have kind of a list of notes that I've taken down and I'm going to do research right now.
Yay! Continued excitement. Well, thank you everyone so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and your process.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Health Rebels, for tuning in today. Have a reaction, question, or want the transcript from today's episode? Find me at alishapiro.com. I'd love if you leave a review on Apple Podcast and tell your friends and family about Insatiable. It helps us grow our community and share a new way of approaching health and our bodies. Thanks for engaging in a different kind of conversation. And remember, always, your body truths are unique, profound, real, and liberating.